Welcome to the Kill the Clock podcast. This is Ravneet. I'm here with Connor Williamson. We're here to talk about the Olympics and Olympic basketball specifically. And we're going to talk about how the USA played during the Olympics. Connor, what did you think about the USA's performance overall in the Olympics?
Um, well, first, thanks for having me on. It's great to be on the show. And as far as the USA over the Olympics goes, they definitely loafed a little bit in the group stage of the tournament, but seemed to turn it on as they got into the knockout stages and the medal round certainly as well. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, how'd you feel about the Serbia game, the gold medal game particularly?
So that was kind of a boring game after the second quarter when Kevin Durant got hot. I mean, he just got on fire and his teammates were looking at for him. And after the second quarter, you could just kind of feel like this game was over. Um, it was, I mean, did you feel like going into the game, did you feel like Serbia had a chance?
You know, not really. Partially because you watch the USA throughout the tournament, and the big thing that they did really well the whole time was rebound. They were the best defensive rebounding team and best offensive rebounding team, and you chalk that up to obviously guys like DeAndre and Boogie, but they had Melo in there getting a bunch of offensive rebounds, and same thing with Paul George. So combine that effort, not well, combine the offensive rebounding, which was there kind of from the start of the tournament, with increased effort on defense, more easy buckets. It was kind of a foregone conclusion. I mean, I don't think many people gave Serbia much of a chance, even though they only lost by 3, I think, in the group stage.
So that's what I was going to ask you about because in the group stage they looked really good. Jokic looked amazing, and he seemed like he was the best player at times in that game, and he just dominated. So going into the game, I thought it would be closer than what a complete blowout. But I mean, what did you think about? I mean, in the goal game, he didn't really seem like he was the same player.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Serbia, and they didn't start Jokic, and neither did and Bogdanovic was also kind of in and out of the game, at least in terms of the way they played. And so, with how, like you said, with how they played against the USA the first game, you would have expected them to kind of go through Jokic, especially since he's such a great passer at the top of the key or interior. And they really didn't do that. They kind of left it up to Teodosic, and Nenovic actually had a pretty good game. He obviously kind of got off a little bit when it was garbage time at the end of the game there, but. Uh, Serbia kind of has the issue where they're missing. Um, they had an injury to Timberwolves. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's on the tip of my tongue. Bielitsa, whose name I'm probably not
Yeah.
pronouncing correctly, but they really could have used him next to Jokic to kind of spread the floor and keep that floor balance. Um, but as it stood, they had to have Raduljica and Jokic play a lot together, which was offensively not great, and defensively you had Jokic out on the perimeter guarding Carmelo, which didn't work at all. And so, it was just kind of hasty. But yeah, I mean, he didn't have that much of an effect on the game. He had little spurts, and he's a really good player, but it seemed like given his age, they were kind of hesitant to run through him at times, which was something that does happen a little more, I think, in international basketball if you look at the clubs over there too in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, he had an inconsistent rookie year, but still a very good one, and was probably the third best rookie in the league last year. But I always thought that his inconsistency had more to do with his lack of playing time with Denver more than anything else. But I mean, I'm just curious, why do you think that they didn't start him in the goal game since he did play so well against the USA in the group stage?
Well, I definitely agree with you that his inconsistency this past year was more to do with opportunity than his actual performance. And I think the same thing can be said of his performance in the Olympics. It's obviously it's only 2 weeks, but still, um, they started Raduljica. He's a little hair better defensively, and he's older.
Hmm.
He's an established player in the program and stuff like that. So it maybe didn't surprise me to not see him start. And Jokic did end up playing more minutes in the game, but it's definitely a situation where they're maybe tipping their hat to kind of the old stalwarts. Um, and at least I personally would like to see Jokic play more, but either way, it wouldn't have tipped the scales. I don't think necessarily one way or the other. Um, the USA kind of had that one locked up. They
Yeah.
maybe it wouldn't have been a 30-point game, but it was still, again, still pretty one sided.
See, that's the thing that it's kind of curious to me. Like, I always figured that you would just want the most talent on the court. In these types of games, like France chose not to have Evan Fournier on their team, correct?
Yeah, that
And
was
I just didn't understand that.
super surprising. Yeah, he missed their qualifying tournament, I think, because of he was doing free agency. And Collet just didn't put him on the team, and I thought they missed him a lot. Their offense did not look great, even though they had Parker, DeColo. I mean, DeColo is a fantastic player, much better than NBA fans remember him. He's improved a lot. And Batum obviously, and they could have played a nice small ball unit with Batum at the 4 and Gobert at center, and
Fournier.
and Fournier at the 3 with those two ball
Yeah.
handling guards, and um, it didn't quite work. I mean, Boris was Boris. Wasn't super in shape, but he still played fine. But I think they could have used that extra look, definitely.
Yeah, I felt like France was one of the teams that could compete against the US, and they proved it in the group stage, and they did it without Tony Parker, and that game went down to the wire as well. And if I just felt like they're just not deep enough, and if they had Fournier and maybe a healthy Parker, they maybe win that game. So that was a little surprising. What why didn't Serge Ibaka play also for Spain?
They so I don't know if he put himself on the on to be up to be considered for Spain, but I know that you can pick one player who's naturalized in Spain. Serge is from Congo, and Spain actually picked Mirotic last year for EuroBasket.
Hmm.
And again, I'm not sure if they could have picked Serge or if he didn't want to play. But either way, you can only have one naturalized player, and for the past couple of years, they've picked Mirotic, which I understand. He's a good shooter. I mean, Serge stretches the floor too, but Mirotic kind of has a more versatile shooting game. He can come off screens rather than just kind of stand in the corner. But Spain, I mean, they really got killed on the boards. Um, so I kind of think that they would have maybe done better than Serge Ibaka, even though he kind of steps on the feet of Reyes. They kind of play that same role, maybe a little limited offensively, but hard nosed interior defender type role.
I mean, it did seem like they were missing. I mean, they really missed Marc Gasol
Yeah,
against the U.S. And I felt like if they had him, they had a legit chance to beat the U.S. I felt like, and one of the things that was hurting them was, like you said, like not having enough rebounders on the floor, and the U.S. really took advantage of it. And Spain just they a lot of the times when the U.S. had played against other teams in this tournament, it felt like the other teams were just more unified and played together a lot better than the U.S. And it was just a lot of one-on-one ball with the U.S. Um, and their defense was just horrible early on. But once it got to the knockout rounds, they just turned the defense way up, intensity way up, and I think that was the difference. Um, but I mean, did you notice a difference between playing styles between the U.S. and other countries?
Oh, definitely. I mean, other countries ran sets.
Yeah.
Spain got into their offense. Serbia did a good job. Serbia and Australia were the two kind of sharpest teams offensively, at least in terms of overall cohesion and style of play. They kind of all knew their role and all bought into it. Whereas USA, you had Kevin Durant for better or for worse. There are still plenty of capable shot makers, but you had Kevin Durant kind of drifting in and out, and there wasn't really a rudder to this USA team. I don't think Kyrie is equipped to kind of run a team. He can run an offense for a few possessions, but in this scenario, there was no Chris Paul, there was no Jason Kidd, as there has been in years past, who was a great example of a guy who came in and just started running the team, basically out of nothing. So they definitely missed kind of that floor general type point guard, and that definitely hurt their offense in terms of its flow. And some guys didn't want to play, Russ, Steph, and then another guy, LeBron, and other guys were hurt. John Wall and Mike
Yeah.
Conley, I think, could have been great on this team in lieu of Harrison Barnes and DeMar DeRozan, but they were hurt and not available.
Yeah. Apparently, Steph might have been hurt too. Jerry Colangelo was saying that like Steph was really sad that he couldn't play, and he called them saying that that he might need off-season surgery. So, I mean that also would have been a big difference. I felt like a step up from Kyrie.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then the other thing that goes into it is these three guys were hurt, so maybe take them out of consideration. But the fact that those two last roster spots went to DeMar and Harrison Barnes, those are two Nike guys. They're not, they could have maybe picked a point guard who is, just as good as Harrison Barnes, but Harrison Barnes is, after all, a Nike player. So maybe that had a little bit to do with the selection there. Harrison Barnes also is a good small ball four, so it's an understandable selection, but maybe a little bit Nike motivated as well.
So you think that Nike players were selected or took preference over on Wall?
Well, so I would like to have like a great conspiracy theory, but unfortunately, like Wall was hurt. He had off-season knee surgery. Conley, I think, still had his wrist or hand from the season. So, as much as I would love to delve into the corporate conspiracy theories, I think in this case there was just kind of a lack in the point guard market. And I mean, that's something we're seeing in the NBA, right? There aren't too many strictly floor general point guards, especially not American ones. So that's just kind of a circumstance that they had to deal with when selecting, I think, more than anything.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm maybe biased because Isaiah Thomas is one of my favorite players, but actually would have liked to see him get more of a chance. Barnes, though I also do feel like that Barnes wasn't utilized properly at times. Like I do think he's better at the four in the NBA and overseas, but we really didn't see much of him either. So I mean, I would rather see. I think Isaiah Thomas would have there, and he would have done a better job at times than just Kyrie pick and roll, which we just saw so many times at the end of games.
Yeah, we saw the Kyrie pick and roll. We saw the Durant pick and roll a lot, and it was without if they as long aside for a few possessions where DeAndre blocked shots so far that they started fast breaks.
Yeah.
There weren't a ton of easy looks created, which given the talent on the roster, wasn't too much of an impediment, but it definitely wasn't the most fun thing to watch. And the other thing that was interesting to me about this USA team was that they didn't have a college player, and that was intriguing. I thought that I think that was more of a function of there not being a worthy college player. Brandon Ingram probably isn't close to the player Anthony Davis was in 2012
Yeah.
in London. But it was an interesting consideration. Maybe bring up Chris Dunn even to the Olympic team and see if he can do something instead of Harrison Barnes.
a fan of the college player in the Olympics, you know, and just it seems like the role is just to sit on the bench. I mean, I think it's beneficial um uh for the most part though. There've been some few exceptions to that, I think, but it just seems like that's just a wasted spot, and that guy's gonna warming up the bench.
Yeah, but I mean Harrison and DeMar DeRozan, quite frankly, were kind of bench warmers anyway. I guess that's not fair to DeMar. He played a little bit, but Harrison Barnes was mostly a bench warmer anyway.
Yeah,
I think it's good for the program. You know, had Anthony Davis been healthy this year, he could have reaped the benefits of taking what he learned, and um, I'm certain that he probably learned so much from guys like Tyson Chandler and LeBron. I mean, there's the list is the whole roster really, but I think it's just good for the program to get the young guys in there, and they do that still. I mean, they had the select team
yeah.
and they still had the training camp, and they had Miles Turner and Moutier and all those guys in there, so they still are applying those opportunities. But it was interesting to see that there was no college player on there.
Yeah,
um,
that's a good point actually. I didn't really consider that. Like if for Anthony Davis, I'm sure you're right. He probably did learn something from his time before. So I guess it isn't if you have a worthy college player, and maybe we didn't have it in this draft, then I do think it's not a bad idea for sure.
yeah, and the foreign invasion of college basketball
Yeah.
with Ben Simmons certainly wasn't eligible for the USA team, so definitely changed things.
So so speaking of Ben Simmons, actually, like where do you see Australia's outlook from this point on? I mean, with Exum, Patty Mills, uh, Simmons, like where do you see the future of Australian basketball?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're pretty good, especially since they did display that cohesion, which is something you see. I mean, these guys, they grow up and they play together for so long. It's kind of like the story that we've seen with the French team, where Diao and Parker have known each other since they were at INSEP together, training as kids, and you see the same thing as in Australia, where they have the AIS, Australian Institute of Sport. So they have a lot of good young talent. I mean, Aaron Baines is also there, Dellavedova. Um, so they definitely have a roster that could be potentially 7 or 8 deep, and Thon Maker coming down the pipeline too. If he,
Right.
depending on where he stands, I don't know if he has Canadian eligibility or anything, um, but hypothetically he could end up on Australia. So that could be a really interesting team with some interesting chemistry going forward. I know Simmons, I've heard, felt kind of slighted when he didn't make. Um, I don't think it was. I think it was a junior team or something like that. He felt slighted by the kind of the federation, and so that may have played into his not playing this year. But I think they'll probably mend that relationship going forward, and it'll be cool to see. I mean, the good thing about Australia is that they have two guards that can shoot, and they have two guards that can play off the ball. So Simmons can kind of do his thing and handle the ball as a big or quasi big,
Yeah.
and they can kind of space the floor without taking Simmons off of it. So that could be interesting to watch. And Aaron Baines, he looks like he's developing definitely as a player. I mean, he showed some things in these Olympics that were kind of surprising. The first game against France, he went right at Gobert and I think scored like 6 points on him, first quarter.
Yeah, he's a big body for sure, and seems like Australia played, like you said, with a lot of cohesion, and it also seemed like there was some warrior actions and a lot of backdoor cuts, and some weak side action to get the shooter open, by like you send you send the ball to the post, and then you set a screen on the other side of the court to get like Patty Mills an open three. And I just found that also kind of interesting, and it just reminded me of the Warriors. I don't know if like Bogut was um, helping the coaching staff with those plays or not, but I mean, did the Australian team remind you a little bit about the Warriors at all?
Yeah, no, totally. And the other thing they reminded me of was the Blazers, watching like Lillard and McCollum come off of those weak side screens,
Yeah,
getting the ball from Plumlee. Yeah, no, totally. And I mean, I'm sure the Australian coaching staff has been watching Bogut play with great interest. I know they had some Spurs staffers. They Brett Brown coached there for a while. He was an
yeah,
assistant with this
it
Australian
did.
team, so um, he probably they probably know how to use Mills' skills really effectively, and he definitely kind of he balled out
Yeah,
enough to the point where on Zach Lowe's podcast they were discussing whether or not Patty Mills should get an opportunity to start once Tony Parker's done, and ask that question even like 9 months ago, and it kind of seems crazy, but after watching the Olympics, it doesn't really seem so wild. He's quite good.
yeah. It's actually funny. I actually thought they should have started Patty Mills against the Clippers in the playoffs a couple of years ago in that 7 games first round series because Parker just did not look the part, and Patty Mills was shooting lights out in that series. And he definitely showed up, and probably he played better than Tony Parker in these Olympics as well. So I don't think it's is as crazy as it may sound.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you can't you can never say this about a Spurs player, right? That, oh man, they're done, they're wearing down, it's finally
Yeah.
catching up with them. But if there is a guy on the Spurs, it would be Tony Parker. He's a shorter guard. He's a quick guard. That his model of player doesn't tend to age well. So I could certainly believe that he would be the guy out of their kind of cohort to be the one that actually does age, as opposed to Timmy and Manu, who just kind of kept going and evolving. And Parker has certainly evolved, but there's just less. There's nowhere for him to go because he relies so much on his athleticism, as opposed to Manu, who was always just kind of a trickster.
Yeah, Manu was just very clever and was still able to get to the rim and became a better shooter as time went on. But Parker really hasn't developed that 3-point shot, and you get slower. You don't really get faster in the league as the more years you play. So you could definitely see that Parker struggles, and not struggles, but he doesn't get to the paint as often as he used to. Um, One quick thing about Australia before we move on. I remember watching an interview about Thon Maker, and they asked him, where would you want to play for international basketball, and he was pretty firm on sticking with Australia. So that's I mean he appreciated what Canada was offering, and they said that they wanted him because he did play 2 years in high school, I believe, in
Mm-hmm.
Canada. But I think he spent most of his childhood in Australia, so he said that he would rather play for them. So that just bodes well for their future as well.
Definitely, yeah, and to have two versatile bigs like that in Maker and Simmons is certainly intriguing as you kind of as we watch the next 4 years of their NBA careers. That's going to be kind of, I guess, in the back of my head to watch and see how they might fit together with Australia.
Yeah, definitely. So, what do you think about Croatia's performance in the Olympics? I mean, Dario Saric had a up and down Olympics, maybe mostly down near the end, but he had a great block against Paul Gasol. I think it was in the first game, and it was a game-winning block. So, what did you think about his performance and just overall about Croatia's performance?
Yeah, I mean Dario. It's funny that he had that block because he's not a shot blocker at all.
Yeah.
But his feel for the game is so good that he obviously knew that the shot had to go up, and Pau doesn't get that much lift these days, or ever really. So he was able to get that one. But I mean Dario, I think he has a really nice stroke. It's just inconsistent, and defensively, like everyone saw on that block play, he's fantastic at rotating to the rim, and really good at contesting with verticality. It's something I think a lot of European bigs do well. They might not have the overwhelming athleticism of a shot blocker, or length necessarily, but they're really good at kind of keeping their body straight up and down, and challenging shots. So I think Dario should be perfectly good help side defender, taking charges and things like that. He's not huge, but he fights for. I mean, he just fights for a position really, really hard. And he has some nice offensive moves. His bag of tricks is pretty slim though. There's not too much to his game offensively in the post, but it's the footwork is clean and it's there. So yeah, I mean, I think he's good. Did you watch much of Croatia over the Olympics? They definitely had some struggles, but they had some promising things happen too.
Yeah, I didn't watch too much of them, but I was interested in his play. And I know Bogdanovic played well, I think, near the end, especially in that game against Serbia. I think he had 28 points or something like that. So I'm more interested not in their play as much as the mystery that surrounds Sarge and his fit in the of big men that are there in Philadelphia. I'm more curious. I mean, what do you think about like his role in Philly? And do you like kind of project him as a starter or bench player?
Yeah. So I like his. A lot of people have been like rave about his passing ability, which is very good. I don't think he's at least right now a phenomenal playmaking passer, but he does make really good kind of like quick snap decision passes. He's not a guy who's gonna have the ball in his hand and read a defense for 5 seconds and make a great pass. But if he catches the ball on a swing, he'll make a good pass. He'll make a cutting pass. Um, that'll kind of break down the defense. So for that reason, I think he'll be a pretty good pick and roll partner with Ben Simmons. Saric operates pretty well from the top of the key, and sees the court well from there. So I definitely could see him doing well with Simmons in the pick and roll, with Simmons handling the ball, especially since if Dario can kind of adjust the NBA 3-point line and clean up his mechanics, which when they're good, they're quite good. When they're bad, they're pretty lackluster. If he can make the pick and pop a real threat, he could really do some damage with Simmons in the pick and roll, especially if they have some other players who can shoot it or maybe cut. If I don't know if he's going to be able to be that much of a perimeter threat to play next to another big, Embiid
Mhm.
or Okafor or Nerlens. That's I think that's something they'll probably try this year, but I don't I don't think it'll work very well. But yeah, I mean, Sarge is certainly an intriguing player on offense, and on defense, I think he'll be he's not going to be a post stopper or a rim protector, but he'll be a good team defender, and he certainly won't probably be a minus on that end.
See, that's kind of what worries me is that he does try hard on defense, and Simmons doesn't usually or didn't in college. Maybe he will in the NBA, but neither project as to be rim protectors, and I don't know how long can you play them together on the floor as a 4 and a 5, or without any rim protection there. So player to play with on that team is Embiid in the front court, but at the same time, like you said, he can't really spread the floor yet. But if he does, then I mean, I'm just really intrigued overall by that team because they have some big men who could really pass and who have really unique skills.
Another player I'd like to see him with is Nerlens, because of the fact that Dario does have the mid range shot down pretty well.
Yeah,
So he's not stretching out to the 3-point line, but he still provides some spacing in the mid range, and his passing ability should allow him to make those high low oops and stuff like that you see. I mean, most famous with Blake and DeAndre. Maybe not that much emphasis,
yeah.
but I would like to fit next to Nerlens as well, and so yeah, I mean, we'll see. To the point about the rim protection, I totally agree. It is curious. I mean, some teams can do it, some teams can't, right? Like the Celtics didn't really have a rim protector last year. I mean, I guess they had Amir Johnson, but
Yeah.
they played a lot of times and played great defense just by kind of blocking off the paint and not protecting the rim. They didn't have a shot blocker. They just kind of everyone kind of strapped up. So I could definitely see Sarge and Simmons developing that kind of verticality skill, and with Simmons rebounding and Sarge's rebounding, that might be feasible, at least feasible enough for them to play together a little bit. But again, this year it probably doesn't matter. They could be a sieve and it wouldn't make a difference for Philadelphia.
Yeah, that's a good point for sure. Um, um, Serbia, because I wanted to talk about Bogdan, who the Kings got his draft rights to by trading the 8th pick and getting the 13th pick, the 28th pick, and the rights to Bogdan, who plays for Serbia. And he didn't really shoot that well in the goal game at all. But he's known as a shooter. So what can you tell us about his performance overall in the Olympics?
I like him. He actually kind of, USA game notwithstanding, he played better than I thought he would. I didn't think his handle was as good as it is. It's not super clean, but it's pretty effective.
Hmm.
So I can definitely kind of picture him as a wing in the NBA, making jump shots, obviously from the corner, from the wing, and then just attacking closeouts really well and getting to the rim. He finished pretty well too, and he was also really adept at making passes out of his drives and doing so at the right time. So for those reasons, I definitely see him as a pretty good NBA player. Maybe not a starter or a third option or anything like that. But certainly an effective player, and I think he's still pretty young, so he has time to kind of develop some other skills, whether that be pick and roll, improving on the defensive end. So who knows what he'll kind of tinker with and add to his game as the years go on. But he definitely has kind of a good starting canvas, I guess, if you're taking an NBA player. And actually, I think we talked about this at Summer League, like that trade in terms of not the players they picked maybe, but the actual the picks that they got and
Hmm.
the assets they got for Sacramento. It was the 8th pick for 13-28 in Bogdan, right? Yeah, that's not a bad, that's not too bad of a trade. So
Not until you draft Papagiannis, I think.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's funny because if you switch Scal, if you take Scal at 13 and take Papagiannis at 28, it probably doesn't raise as many eyebrows.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there were some rumors that um, the Kings would have taken Scal at 13 for them before the draft, but the only player that worked out for them that was drafted in the first round, I think, was Wade Baldwin. So a lot of players just don't want to come to Sacramento. So that's why I'm curious about Bogdan, and I noticed passer, and he attacked the paint a couple of times at the closeout, and he made a nice pass to the big man when DeAndre came over.
Yep.
So I thought that was nice. But I think some of his passes can be a little bit off target. Um, and his and I just feel like he's going to be just mostly a shooter. But if he could just be really good at shooting, then I think there's starter potential. But I wouldn't bet on it. And drafted drafted Malachi, I think, with the 22nd pick.
Yeah.
If which of those two is going to be the better player, and I'm undecided on which one is going to be better.
I would, having just seen Malachi at Summer League, I would lean toward Bogdanovich just because of what you said, because his passing out of the drive is something that I haven't seen Malachi do. And to be fair, Malachi is a little younger,
Mm-hmm.
but but he has a little bit more to work with in terms of what he already has in his repertoire. And yeah, I mean, he's a pretty solid player. And again, the trade they made for the 22nd pick, Marco Bellinelli for 22, not a bad trade. The player, we'll see.
Yeah, and he's a wild card for sure. But
That's yeah.
uh, I was always going to ask you. I was going to ask, oh, do you feel like Does Bogdan kind of remind you of Clay Thompson at all, or am I way off on that? Like a poor man's Clay Thompson.
And certainly in terms of his body type and the way he's not necessarily, I think he's a little bit better of a, well, talking about when Clay was a rookie or 21 or however old they, comparing Clay at 21 versus Bogdan 21, I think Clay was certainly a better shooter and had better, his form is way more pure. But I get what you're saying in terms of their frame and their kind of role in the offense. Like Bogdan again, he's a good passer and he's good at attacking closeouts, but he's not a guy that you're going to give the ball to in the pick and roll and say, all right, like let's have you make some magic. Like let's have you run the offense and get you in the ISO situations. He's certainly not that guy, and Clay definitely isn't either. So they similar roles, but I don't think Bogdanovic's jump shot is as strong as Clay's was, and I think
Yeah.
his ability in the paint and traffic is probably a little better.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you were at Summer League, and I'm just curious, did you ever watch Malachi play live over there?
Yeah. I watched the Kings a few times, mostly to see Papagiannis and kind of see what everything was about. But I definitely saw Malachi.
Did it seem like that he was just disinterested at times, and like that he just really didn't care about the team?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to tell with guys at summer league because you wonder if that's a symptom of the team or something about the players. Well, from the outside at least, if you're a coach, you probably know. But like, did he feel disinterested? Did he look disinterested because he was floating around out there, not really knowing what to do because it's a summer league team, or did he look disinterested because that's his attitude and it's a bad attitude? So I definitely know what you mean, and I saw what you're saying, but I didn't know what to chalk it up to. So um, I guess I didn't really, I kind of held off on a judgment on that, but he definitely kind of floated around out there sometimes, and without much direction.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that. But back to Olympic basketball now. What did you think about Australia? I mean, Argentina's um, play this Olympic round, and like, is this is the last time we're going to see Manu and probably Luis Scola in an Argentinian basketball uniform now.
Nocioni as well, or Nocioni.
Yeah,
I'm not sure which it is, but yeah, the golden generation. I had never seen Campazzo play before. He's really good. One of my buddies runs Los Crossovers, which is a primarily Spanish basketball blog, and he loves Facundo Campazzo, and now I know why. He's definitely a maestro with the ball on offense. So yeah, I mean Argentina, excuse me. They played well. They were wily. They were kind of everything you'd expected from them, right? Like they weren't gonna outrun you or outjump you or outgun you really, but they were gonna kind of hang around with you just by pressing every single little advantage they could, just because they're so cerebral and so connected mentally with one another. So kind of par for the course for Argentina, but definitely emotional when they played their last game against USA and they left the court, which was cool for them because I'm sure that the Argentinian faction had no trouble getting over to Brazil, to watch them play for the last time. So that is cool for them to maybe not be in their home country, but be close to it for their last hurrah.
definitely. I mean, this was the first Olympics in South America, I think, ever. So it was a big moment for them, and I'm sure a lot of Argentinian people came to Brazil, to Rio to see them play. And so it was a sad moment. It brings up memories of 2004 when they did get the gold and how they just upset the U.S. in during that time. So it brought back good memories, and it's sad to see this team go because the outlook doesn't look too great. I don't know of too many great up and coming young Australian players for their Olympic team.
Yeah, I looked a little bit into that just because they had a lot of guys on their roster that were young but didn't really play. Other than Campazzo, who's 25, and he's going to run that team for a while. But also on Argentina and Manu and the Golden Generation. Before we move, did you read Zach Lowe's article on Manu, the
Yeah,
Familia? I thought that was really well
that was
done,
great.
and it
Yeah.
and it definitely made me appreciate watching them a lot more. Um, and it was funny to me that when they talk about the team dinners that they always do, that's exactly what Larry Bird's Pacers teams did, and which is something I think that he took from the Celtics. So it was really interesting to me how I'm not sure whether that was something that Manu learned from through the grapevine from Bird. I would guess not, but it definitely kind of just reinforces the fact that the same kind of patterns of a good cultural team and organization they show up even though they could be developed in the NBA or Argentina. So that was really cool to kind of get that background on the team. You know,
Yeah.
during the
No,
Olympics.
yeah, that's a great article. If any of you haven't read it, then I would go read that immediately. Um, and in that article, there's a link posted to I think Manu's game-winning shot against Serbia, I want to say, and that I think that shot got them to the gold medal round, if I'm
In
correct.
'04, I believe you are. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, yeah. So that shot was just it was nuts. He was like it was I don't remember if it was a half court pass or a full court pass, but Manu catches it, goes up the court, and then lays it up with I mean, throws a left hand kind of floater off the backboard, and it goes in, and during the buzzer, and then his whole team kind of um, piles on top of him, and it was just like a surreal moment. And it just that type of continuity that you were talking about with the dinners and just the way they play together is something I think the U.S. has that continuity off the court, but Argentina was able to do it off the court and on the court, and I think that's something that the USA lacks on the court at least.
Yeah, and I do think that countries with less NBA talent, of course, are at a disadvantage when it comes to getting on the court in the Olympics and everything. But they also are maybe at an advantage because their players play longer. They've played together for longer, so that they do have
Hmm.
more kind of cohesiveness built in. There's more structure built in because you, if Manu were playing for USA, he would have probably stopped playing after '04. He'd be like, okay, I'm done, got the gold, pass it on to LeBron, I'm out of here. But he has a far bigger responsibility to his nation, so there's less of a an incentive or even a desire to drop out early, and so you see more guys play together for longer, which is another thing that people talk about when they talk about these international teams having a little more, you know, sharpness in their play.
Yeah, I definitely see it, and I thought Australia also did that for sure. Um, but let's move on to Spain because I think from Argentina how they had this kind of slow and inevitable demise, but after playing such great basketball, do you fear that the same thing to happen to Spain, or is Spain basketball just on another level where you don't really see the demise coming anytime soon for them?
Yeah, it's tough to tell at this point because they are you're right, they are at kind of an inflection point. They could go one way or the other. Um, it depends. I mean, a lot of that depends on Marc Gasol. Pau is all but likely done, but if Gasol can, or if Mark, both Gasols,
Mhm.
if Mark can keep going for the next 4 years, that'd probably help them a lot. Like you said, both on and off the court. They just won the U20 European Championships, so that's not that's not the be all end all in terms of indicators for senior team success in any sport, but it is a good look, and they do have some good players. I was prepping I was thinking about that question, and I was kind of looking at their player, and they had this kid named Mark Garcia who can really score the ball. He's 20, so we'll kind of see what happens with him. But they definitely, they have a good infrastructure in place that they built in 2003, around 2003. So they will. I think they'll achieve at least a baseline. I think they'll be in the Olympics for years. And they have the Hernangomez brothers, Juancho and Willie. So
Yeah, I was gonna say
yeah,
that.
so they have some players. I guess we'll just kind of it's hard to see. All their players are at an age where they could, they could take any number of turns, over the next 4 years.
Yeah, Paul Gasol is 36. Rudy Fernandez is 31. Um, Juan Carlos Navarro is 36. Calderon is 34. So they have a semi-old team. A lot of their best players are kind of past their prime. But Rubio is still young, and
Rubio, yeah.
Mark is young. Mirotic is 25. So I agree with you. I think they'll still be an Olympic team. I don't know if they can compete with the U.S. in the future, but it really depends. I'm high on the Hernan Gomez brothers. Not Willie as much as the other guy. But because his brother just spreads the floor a lot better and fits that prototypical that four. And he wasn't on the team this year, but Willie was. And he just seemed like, I mean, he's young, and so he struggled against the U.S. But it seems like he's just not athletic enough to compete with the U.S. players.
Yeah, he definitely has kind of a ceiling to his game. He doesn't look to have kind of the awareness like Gasol does. So I think, I mean, he'll probably what I kind of think of him as is a sort of a Vucevic type player, Willie Hernangomez, and maybe if Mark, if they leave Powell out and Hernan and Juancho can come in and be a really good shooter at the four, who's to say they don't go back to playing Serge and picking Serge instead of Mirotic, yeah. So a frontline rotation of Mirotic, Serge, Juancho, if he can develop into that floor spreader, athletic four type that people think he can, and then Marc Gasol, that would be pretty nice with Hernangomez coming to spell Gasol. That would be a nice 4-5 rotation. And then if they can kind of round that out with, Sergio Rodriguez should still be playing in 4 years. I guess we'll see. He is kind of a small, quick point guard who's 28, maybe 30. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But yeah, Rubio, a lot of that probably hinges on Rubio's jump shot too, which this Olympics didn't look so great.
No. So yeah, I think Spain, they're interesting to me. I just don't know if they're going to compete with the U.S. But the two teams that I feel like can compete down the line against the U.S. is Australia because of Ben Simmons, and maybe just because of their coaching too, which I was very impressed with this summer, and Canada because Canada with Bennett, Tyler Ulis, not Tyler Ulis, sorry. Tyler, I can't remember right now, but
Tyler Ennis.
Right, yeah, and Wiggins. I think Canada. A lot of the teams that were in the Olympics this year, they just didn't have the athleticism to compete with the U.S. So like Argentina, they were just old and they didn't really have many athletic guys, and that really costed them against the U.S. So I feel like Canada and Australia, they won't have those problems down the line. So I think those teams can potentially compete with the U.S.
Yeah, Canada has a really interesting roster. It was disappointing that in qualifying they didn't have Wiggins or a lot of guys, but I mean they also have kind of the rebounding chops because Tristan Thompson to stick with the U.S. on the interior with Thompson and Bennett's a good player internationally. We'll see what his NBA career can unfold after his first 3 or 4 years of being pretty disappointing. But then they also have Corey Joseph, So they
Yeah.
definitely have some players, and Kelly Olynyk also, who I don't think was on the qualifying roster either.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah, so it was kind of disappointing to see them not have their full cohort in the qualifying stages, but in 4 years from now, they could really do some damage as most of their players come into their prime and their pipeline continues to put guys out, because they do have a really good youth basketball structure in place that has been uh, developed since like 10 years ago. So they're starting to reap the benefits of that. And then their coaching staff too. They have Triano and I think Vanderpool is there too from the Blazers. Both those guys. So
Yeah, definitely. Why wasn't Wiggins and Olynyk on the qualifying
I'm not sure. I mean,
team?
I would just chalk it up to them being trying to stay healthy and rest and work on their game rather than play games, because that is kind of the Canadian one of the Canadian credos is one person we forgot to mention, Dwight Powell,
Right.
who was a pretty good interior player who just got paid. But yeah, so a
Yeah.
lot of a lot of the Canadian kind of mindset is built around practicing rather than competing, and so maybe they probably the Canadian team maybe would rather have them spend the summer working on their games, and then coming in 4 years from now, far better. Looking at their roster now, they don't have a guy who was born. They have a guy who was born in '98, and then after that, the youngest guy was born in '93, who was Anthony Bennett. So it doesn't look like they had a ton of guys in that age range. They had a lot of like 25, 26 year olds, but not a ton of guys in the Wiggins age range.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you see them competing with the US down the line possibly then?
It, maybe that's not a good answer. They could certainly do it with Joseph and Wiggins and Tristan Thompson and Powell and Olynyk. I could see it as a possibility. I wouldn't bet on it, of course, but I do. Canadian basketball is actually something that I've looked into quite extensively, and they have a really good system in place. So maybe I wouldn't bet on maybe this current core of players, but I would bet on the next core of players that's coming through, because they do have a really good infrastructure in place that I think is better than our own, um, in terms of making the most of their talent, which they do have quite a lot of.
So then which team would you planning about like oh this the US just dominates and there's no team that really can compete with them? And I was like, you know what? Like Spain almost beat them. If they had Marcus All, they could have beaten them. I felt like if the US had faced France, then with the healthy France, and if France had Fournier, then maybe they could have competed. But since those two teams are kind of old now, and it seems like they're going to go more towards getting worse than getting better. I mean, which team? If you had to pick one team that would upset the U.S. in the future, which team would that be?
If I had to pick one, it would probably be Canada. Yeah, just because of the fact that they have all of the benefits of the U.S. basketball system at their disposal, with also the advantages of having their basketball system in place.
So
And
oh, go ahead.
not Australia. Yeah, I mean I think Australia is a close second, just for the sheer factor of Simmons, and they also have a very good youth sports infrastructure with AIS. So, and their physical education, honestly, like in their public schools, is fantastic. So that just breeds more and more athletes. So Australia, I think, is another bet, and Croatia could sneak up on people if Dragan Bender becomes a really good player. They also have Hazonia and Saric, so that could be a team to watch as well. Um, and
Yeah,
they have a great basketball culture. But yeah, I don't know what would your bet be in terms of beating the U.S. Even though
I
probably
was
no.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I wouldn't put money on it, and I wasn't gonna put money on it this time around either. Just the US just has too much talent, and um, I feel like we played well together. You're not. I don't know if we're gonna see guys opt out of the Olympics, like the top. Like we're maybe Steph comes back for the next Olympics, so that would just make the U.S. that much stronger. But if I had to pick one team, it would probably be Australia, just because of Simmons and the way they play together. And if they keep that coaching staff and that continuity, then I would probably say them. But I'm very excited about Canada, and I kind of like that there's these two up and coming young countries that are gonna possibly challenge the U.S. down the line. So I'm excited for it. I'm hoping we don't see, even though I want the U.S. to win. I'm just hoping we don't see blowout games like the one we just saw in the gold game.
So I'm actually on the other side of the fence. I actively root against the U.S. in international basketball. I would much rather see us lose and overhaul our youth basketball infrastructure, which we're already starting. We're already starting to make positive changes, but I would much rather get more wake up calls like '04 than to kind of keep riding the tide.
That's
um,
such a anti-American statement you just made.
yeah, hot takes. But yeah, no. The other thing to consider in 2020, we have Popovich, so that will make us certainly hard to beat, I think, as well. Um, and did you see the quote today? Maybe not quote, but the LeBron said he would definitely consider. He said playing for the greatest coach ever in 2020 because he had that opportunity to play with Popovich.
Wow, I actually didn't see that. That's pretty big news. And I mean, LeBron said that he was going to enter the dunk contest, so I don't know how much value I'm going to put into that, but I do think Popovich is the best coach of all time, and I would salivate at the experience that I would get playing for him under Team USA. And I mean, what do you think about the move from Coach K to Coach Pop for the next Olympics?
I like it. I do. I mean, I like Coach K a lot too. So you're going. I mean, in my opinion, you're going from good to great. Even not even good to great. From great to greater. But I mean, the USA, and this is something that I heard on the Nate Duncan podcast. He had a guest on. I can't remember his name. Who was an international basketball buff, and he was talking about how the advantage that teams had against us in '04 and kind of in that era of the NBA, the mid 2000s, was that a lot of the innovation in basketball was coming from Europe. It was coming from the European side and not the American side. Whereas now the innovation is coming from the U.S. I mean, you look at Popovich, who has a staff of American and international coaches. You look at we even had an international coach, David Blatt, was in the NBA, who had success but was kind of maligned, but was still a perfectly good tactical coach for all things considered. And so it seems that the ingenuity, at least the argument was, which I definitely buy, the ingenuity is kind of back on this side of the ocean. If you look at Brad Stevens, Mike Budenholzer, I mean, there's the Spurs tree, but then there's also just kind of random young guys popping up like Stevens. So that is, I think, an advantage that we have that is a little underplayed, and that we kind of have the coaching core back, at least at the elite level.
Yeah, definitely. And we're almost out of time, but before I let you go, I was going to ask you about Draymond Green, because he's such a great player in with the Golden State, and he's a top two defensive player in our league. But it seemed like Coach K didn't really want to use him that much, and so two questions, I guess. Do you think with Popovich next time, do you expect Draymond to have a bigger role and him spending more time at the five and not the four, kind of like he was doing this time? Um, his overall performance will be better in Olympic basketball.
I don't think he's very well suited to play maybe not international basketball, but Team USA basketball, at least the way it was this past year. I actually tweeted this out the other day watching a Team USA game. He excels a lot when things are kind of moving around and hectic. He's a guy who makes really good. Again, he's not a guy who's going to dribble the ball. He's improving at this, but he's not there yet. He's not a guy who's going to dribble the ball, then find like this crazy groundbreaking pass. He's a guy who's going to catch the ball off a roll to the basket and make the right read 9 times out of 10, and then execute that read 9 times out of 10. So he kind of thrives with chaos. He thrives playing downhill, and that's not really something the U.S. did a lot in the half court. And since his jump shot isn't at the level of he can just kind of stand out there and chuck away, he didn't really have a ton of value offensively. That's where he derives a lot of his value offensively, playing the center, because he can roll to the rim as well. But then the other thing defensively, it's Kevin McHale said this in an open court. He said Draymond Green couldn't grow enough to guard me, and I think that's absolutely true, because you guard Kevin McHale, you're just not, if you're 6'8", you're just not going to stop him, no matter how good a defensive player you are, because his offensive repertoire is so good, his footwork is so clean, that you have to have a physical advantage almost to be able to defend him, as well as amazing technique. And I think, to some degree, the international bigs have a little bit of a cleaner game on the post. And so it's a little bit it's a little bit harder for Draymond to kind of leverage his footwork and technique when he doesn't have the size. And then he also isn't the elite rebounder that Draymond Green is, or sorry, DeAndre Jordan is. So I would rather have DeAndre Jordan on the court grabbing rebounds and sucking in the defense at the hoop than Draymond Green, whose strengths are, he's still a fantastic player, but at least in this year's Team USA environment, with the the stagnant offense and the type of teams you're playing, matching up against defensively, I actually don't think the fit was great, even though he did deserve to be on the team. He's fantastic.
Yeah, and I kind of wonder though, like DeMarcus Cousins and DeAndre Jordan were more used as the roll man in the pick and roll, especially with Kyrie. And I felt like if you had Draymond, or you can even do this with Cousins and have one of those guys pop out, it would have made it, I think, less predictable on the U.S. side whether the big is going to pop out or go to the basket, because the European big men, you're just not going to. It just seems like those guys are a little bit bigger, and they're going to struggle with guarding the pick and roll and pick and pop. But if you're just going to go roll to the basket, then you become pretty predictable. So I think I wanted to see Coach K kind of use Draymond at the 5 and pop him out, or even have Cousins pop out, because he's a decent shooter as well. But I guess we're not going to see it this time around.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I think the shorter line gives Draymond, and actually to your point, Cousins too, a little bit more of a probability of hitting those 3-point shots off the pick and pop. And maybe Draymond just didn't have a shot going the past 2 weeks. Maybe it just wasn't going in, and so he didn't. Maybe it's as simple as that. That he just wasn't making shots, and so he just didn't play that much. But yeah, no, that's a good point. I would have liked to see a little bit more, maybe nuance in the screen and roll, screen and pop. But at the same time, you can always get an advantage through sucking in the defense on the roll, because they're always going to commit. Unless you're playing against Rudy Gobert, you're not playing against a team that has a guy who can cover that ground. So yeah, I definitely, it may just have been a thing that they had kind of as a plan C, but they never had to resort to it.
Yeah, I mean, this team was just too good. And it was fun for the drama during the close games, but in the end, I'm happy the U.S. won. I just wish one of those close games was in the goal game. because it would have made, I think, other basketball fans appreciate Olympic basketball, which I didn't necessarily do before this year. So I think that's about it for this episode. I want to thank you guys for listening. I want to thank Connor for coming on, and we're on iTunes and Stitcher, so make sure to follow and subscribe us on those apps. And we'll talk to you guys in the next one.